Hello, for this video I'll be teaching how to use correlation and regression. So basically this is under bivariate statistics and as well inferential statistics when we do hypothesis testing. Okay, so technically we have two terminologies. So we have correlation then regression. These are two very similar measurements because they could either use the same formulas. However, we use the terminologies and the process differently according to the objectives of your study. Okay, so we have to define the terminologies first. So first we have correlation. So when we look into correlation, it attempts to investigate the correlationship or the relationship or association of two variables. So it's best to understand by looking into this illustration. So we have two variables. I didn't use the independent variable and dependent variable in the sense that there is no cause and effect, there is no causality. So therefore, we have one variable. When one variable, the values move either in a certain direction, upward, downward, etc., it would now be associated as well with the movement of the second variable. So it's not basically cause and effect, but it's more likely of a relationship than association. So these two are actually mutual or reciprocal with one another. While on the other hand, we have regression. Now we use regression in order to describe how an independent variable is numerically related to the dependent variable. So technically, we have now the causality. Now when we use the independent and dependent variable, we could now see how the variables are related with one another. So technically, we have the independent variable. The presumed cause will now affect your dependent variable. So there's causality. Now please take note, in terms of the variables, the classification of variables, correlation and regression seldomly uses nominal variables. So technically, we use continuous such as interval and ratio, and also ordinal because there are ranges of values in ordinal variables. Okay. Now, technically, before going to the formula part, which is this one, how can we identify if we extracted or generated data from this measurement? Then how can we identify or analyze those findings? So there are two ways. First is the types. The type. What would be the movement of those variables, then later on the classification of your variables. May I first go with the types? So though there are two types of correlation. So we have direct correlation. This is also known as positive correlation. So technically, looking into the movement of variables, when one variable goes up, the other variable goes up as well. Or the other way around, when one variable goes down, when the numbers decreases, the second variable, its values also decreases. So, ganun lang interplay niya. Then, when you try to illustrate it in a scatter plot, so we have the y-axis, then the x-axis. Then, we now plot it to the respective intersections. Magmumukha siyang ganito. So, pag ganun siya, no? So, it's a 45 degrees, but yeah. So, sort of like this. While on the other hand, we have inverse correlation. Inverse correlation, some would say it's indirect or negative correlation as well, where we could now see the opposite of movements between variables. So technically, when one variable goes up or increases, the values in the second variable decreases. Or when we try to use regression, for instance, the independent variable decreases, it's the total opposite of your dependent variable, it increases. So, ganun lang siya, no? And from the scatter plot, ganito yung magiging ano niya, movement. Okay. Now, the second way in interpreting or analyzing the findings of correlation or regression is we have the correlation coefficient arbitrary range. So, technically, what we are looking for, there are a lot of formulas in correlation and regression. What we are looking for is the R value or the Pearson's value. So technically, we compute for the R, for instance. Then from the findings, we will now allocate or look for its equivalent from within its range. So we have this one. So from how to paano sabihin to? Okay. Kung banda siya dito, more likely when the range or the R falls under the respective range, we have the following qualitative interpretation. So very high, high correlation, moderate, low, and very low. So we'll be looking into what would be the strength of your correlation. No? Is it weak or is it high, etc. What are those positive and negative? Pag negative siya, pag positive, directly it's a direct correlation. Pag yung result natin would be negative, automatically inverse siya. So, aside from looking to the strength of your correlation, nakikita din natin immediately kung direct or inverse correlation. Now, there are a lot of formulas when it comes with correlation and regression. However, I'll just introduce and discuss two common formulas lang, no? And these are the common formulas actually. So pag persons are both variables are continuous, so interval ratio siya. So we'll be using this formula. Then on the other hand, if either one of the variables is ordinal and one is continuous, or both are ordinal, statisticians would now suggest that we'll be using Spearman rho or Spearman rank. So ito yung ano niya, no? So there will be separate videos for the manual computation for these two videos, for these two formulas.